Let us pray. At the beginning of this week, we ask you, Father, to renew and strengthen in us the awareness of our duty and privilege as members of this legislature. We ask you also in your divine providence to bless and protect the Assembly and the province we are elected to serve. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill being the Advanced Education Statutes Amendment Act, 1987. The bill updates the wording and clarifies some ambiguities in the Banff Centre Act, the Universities Act, the Colleges Act, and the Technical Institutes Act. It also adds 3 more public members to the Banff Centre Board and provides for additional public members to be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council to college boards.
The Honourable Member for Stettler has moved first reading to Bill 44, Advanced Education Statutes Amendment Act 1987. All those willing to give assent to first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill 44, being Advanced Education Statutes Amendment Act 1987, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Downey, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 44 be placed on the order paper under government bills and orders.
Having heard the motion by the Government House Leader, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of Grant MacEwan Community College as required by statute.
Introduction of special guests.
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Premier Getty, who is absent from the House due to travelling to Humboldt, Saskatchewan for an important meeting of Western Premiers, I would like on his behalf to introduce 21 students in the grade 6 class at the St. Teresa School in the White Mud constituency. They are accompanied by their teacher, Mrs. Mallow, and I would ask them to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome from this Assembly.
Athabasca Lac La Biche, followed by Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to the members of this Assembly 36 grade 7 and 8 students from Fawcett School in the constituency of Athabasca Lac La Biche. They are accompanied by 2 teachers, Mr. Tim Lawhey and Mrs. Laurie Fullerton, and 1 parent, bus driver Mr. Steve Howard. They are seated in the members' gallery. I would request that they rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly 4 visitors from the City of Lloydminster today. And as I call their names, if they would stand, they are His Worship the Mayor, Bill Condrell, Commissioner Roger Brecko, Chief Engineer Jim Duxworth, and a businessman from the city, John Barrijon. I would say at this time that our illustrious mayor has resigned his position, and I just want to say personally that what a great job he's done in the city, and I would also ask all members of the Assembly to give them the cordial welcome.
Hagerville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly today 70 students from grades 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the Chipman School in the Vegreville constituency. They're accompanied by their principal, Mrs. Sylvia Zaharkiw, who is known to members of the Assembly as the eldest daughter of the former MLA for Vegreville, Mr. John Batuk, and 3 other teachers, Mrs. Lorraine Perlich, Mr. Ron Guglich, Mrs. Rita Paquette, and 2 parents, Mrs. Wendy Jansen and Mrs. Hazel Henderson. They're seated in the public gallery, and I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the members of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it's not often that I get a chance to introduce someone from the good constituency of Calgary-Shaw, but I have that privilege today by way of introducing Mrs. Uda Davies, who is in the Members Gallery. She serves us very well, Mr. Speaker, on the Social Care Facilities Review Committee. I'd ask her to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, on May the 7th, I believe it was, the Minister announced that the provincial mill rate under the School Foundation program will increase from 14.7 to 15.5. Now, Mr. Speaker, most homeowners are, of course, exempt from this tax, but the Alberta small business community, especially those in the retail sector, will have to pay in spades. Mr. Speaker, the Minister at the time described this as a 5.4% increase, conveniently forgetting that there are also assessment increases, and the tax bill reflects both assessment and rate increases. For example, we're told in the City of Calgary the businesses could face up to 13%. My question to the Minister now is simply this. Will the Minister now acknowledge that the tax increase is actually in double digits for many Alberta businesses?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to comment after the move by the province on May the 5th, as outlined in the budget on March the 20th, and now being asked on May the 25th of the level of the School Foundation program levy. The Leader of the Opposition made one slight error in his introduction, and that is when he said most homeowners are exempt from the levy. In fact, all homeowners are exempt from the levy, and it is only applied on non-residential assessment across the province. The increase is 5.4% and is levied on the equalized assessment across the province.
A supplementary question. Yes, we're well aware of the increase, but would the Minister also acknowledge that there were assessment increases, and that because of these assessment increases along with the mill rate increase, that many businesses are facing increases of up to 13%, specifically in Calgary?
Mr. Speaker, the process of equalizing assessment across this province has been occurring for many, many years. If there was a higher than the levy increase on some businesses, it was because certain properties in other parts of the province were being assessed at a higher level in the previous year. The equalization process itself is neutral. Yes, the effect of the 5.4% increase or the application of 15.5 mills is different across the province.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's refreshing to understand that the Minister now acknowledges that. My question is simply, did the Minister, in view of the economic circumstances faced by many small businesses in this community, did the Minister look in or think about, especially the circumstances of the retail sector in particular, before she brought in these taxes that are going to gouge them even more?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Well, supplementary question then. I take it by that answer, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister doesn't care what happens to the small business sector in this community. And I would ask her, what, in the view of the fact that the provincial government is cutting back by 3%, why are we taking more money from the retail sector, and especially at a time that they can't afford it? What is the logic with charging more in taxes when the education is being chopped back by the government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, education is not being chopped back by the government. But certainly there is a view in this province that the industrial levy or the school foundation levy should not change. And in fact, that was exactly what this government did over the past 2 years. However, it was our view that because everyone was being called upon to assist in a very difficult economic time in this province, that industry should not be exempt from that act. And finally, I would note that on a provincial basis, an average school supplementary requisitions across the province have risen by an average of about 5% in a difficult fiscal year, and this levy increase is in keeping with that level as well.
Barr, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Provincial Treasurer or the Minister of Education. In light of the fact that we seem to get this horror show about every 7 years when we do a reassessment, is the government seriously looking at a system in the day and age of computers where we can keep assessment more up to date than we presently do?
It's been a while, Mr. Speaker, since I've had a chance to deal with municipal assessment. It perhaps is more appropriate that my colleague, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, deal with it. But in fact, it's true that there are sophisticated systems which would in fact allow for indexing or adjustments to a variety of property classes on an annual basis. And it's even more appropriate, Mr. Speaker, that in fact some municipalities are employing those right now, so that in fact the wide variations in assessment which take place, which to some extent may cause some distortion in the allocation of the impact of certain taxes, can be rectified or at least smoothed over a longer period of time.
Westlock Surgeon, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, if I may, back to funding of education. The Minister of Education, could she enlighten the House or could the Minister enlighten the House to whether or not, with in view of the increased assessment and funds that will be coming in, whether she will change her mind to fund education for the handicapped and the disabled in our schools that are now being discriminated against by our school boards because the funding is not coming through from the minister to the school boards. Obviously, here in Edmonton, we've had to throw out hundreds.
The question has been asked, please, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it never ceases to amaze me at the misunderstanding of the way in which education is financed in this province. And I welcome an opportunity to speak to the important issue of financing special education in Alberta. There is, as the member points out, an administrative dispute between the Edmonton and the Edmonton Public and Separate School Boards. However, I would note that the only way which a parent is required to pay an extra fee for a disabled child is if he has voluntarily removed his child from the school system to which he is a supporter.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Calgary Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, my questions this afternoon are to the Minister of Career Development and Employment. At least 100 workers at Woodward's food floors in Lethbridge, Red Deer, Calgary, and Edmonton have found out that they're going to be laid off despite the 20 years and more of service with Woodward's. And these stem from the takeover by Canada Safeway of Woodward's food floors. Does the minister propose to sit by and allow this to happen, or will he be intervening to protect the interests of long-time Woodward's employees?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I am too aware of the report with regard to the Woodward's workers, and I certainly am not in a position, nor do I have an inclination to intervene, but certainly I will make the full resources of the department available to those individuals who may be losing their job as a result of this arrangement. I do not know the final details, Mr. Speaker, and I'll certainly review them, and I'd be pleased to report back to the member in that connection at the next sitting of this House.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was surprised to learn that the jobs of these employees had not been protected by Investment Canada when they allowed the sale to proceed in the first place. Did the minister or anyone in the provincial government that he could speak for make any representations to Investment Canada to request that the jobs of Woodward's employees be protected in this takeover by this giant American multinational?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we We are always concerned, obviously both sides of the legislature are always concerned in the matter of employment, and particularly if there is jobs lost based on restructuring of the economy. Mr. Speaker, we certainly are not in a position to be a part of the decision. That's a federal decision with regard to Investment Canada and the arrangement. Obviously, they've reviewed it and have their views. I'm certainly concerned, as Minister responsible for employment, if any arrangement such as the Woodward's arrangement results in the loss of jobs, Mr. Speaker. But I'm certainly not going to intervene in a decision that is made in the business community, Mr. Speaker. But I certainly will make the resources of my department available to the individuals who may be dislocated as a result.
Mr. Speaker, Woodward's Foods have in the past purchased their wholesale products through Alberta firms, whereas Safeway, by and large, uses its own giant wholesale arm, McDonald's Consolidated. Is the Minister making any representation or requests to anyone that Safeway maintain the use of the Woodward's wholesale operations and maintain Alberta business and Alberta jobs, rather than amalgamating all of its wholesale operations through McDonald's Consolidated?
Mr. Speaker, I may, at the end of my comment, turn that question over to the Minister for Agriculture, the Minister for Economic Development and Trade, for they are two individuals that are actively involved in the Buy Alberta campaign that is very strongly supported by this government. And I'm sure that the Minister of Agriculture would certainly be pleased to indicate his efforts in the area of Buy Alberta to encourage all companies that are doing business in the produce area to buy their products here in Alberta.
Supplementary might be asked to the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my supplementaries are to this Minister, who I thought was the one responsible for employment policy and job protection. This Minister, Mr. Speaker, indeed this government is quite fond of telling us and Albertans how foreign investment brings jobs to Alberta. In view of the restructuring going on in the food industry because of this takeover, and with the store closures and the layoffs announced today, will the Minister offer an estimate of the number of jobs that will be created by this takeover by this American giant multinational?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't comment on that, but I can comment on the fact that that in 1986 there were 22,000 more jobs in Alberta as a result of arrangements, takeovers, mergers. Mr. Speaker, it's a financial arrangement, it's a business arrangement. Certainly if it affects jobs, we are concerned, but I'm not in a position to intervene into the marketplace in decisions that are made along these lines. As I indicated, I do have a concern for the individuals that could possibly be dislocated as a result of this arrangement, and certainly we'd be willing to provide assistance to them.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon, main question or supplementary?
It's supplementary, Mr. Speaker, if I may, to the Minister. In view of the fact that his national leader, the Prime Minister, and the Chief Negotiator, Mr. Reisman, has said quite clearly that Canada is up for sale, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are already oil companies, Dome and others, going under to the Americans. Will the minister develop some sort of policy, some sort of warning guidelines to these multinational takeovers that the Albertans will just not be thrown out on the street without a job, that they will have to obey certain regulations before they can lay off someone when they take over?
Well, the answer is no, Mr. Speaker. Multinational companies in Alberta employ Albertans. It's not as though a multinational company such as Amoco employs 5,000 Americans. They employ Albertans, Mr. Speaker. And if the honourable member is suggesting that we should treat multinational firms differently than we do Alberta firms, we're talking about treating employees differently that are Albertans, Mr. Speaker. They come here, they do businesses in this province, they employ Albertans, and they pay taxes, Mr. Speaker, and they contribute to the well-being of the economy of this province.
Main question, West Loch Sturgeon, followed by Clover Bar.
For Albertans, not fair treatment for multinationals. Main question, Mr. Speaker. the minister's program, this is on, back to the same minister, Minister of Welfare, or for Minister for Career Development and Employment, or Unemployment, whatever he wishes to call. The minister's program will solve two fundamental problems in the social security system: the dependence it creates for many recipients and the inability of the social safety net to catch anyone who finds himself in need. Will the minister not consider, Mr. Speaker, halting his program of work for welfare, that go back to the drawing board to find some solutions to these major shortcomings? For instance, admission that the work for welfare program is a short-term strategy rather than a long-term strategy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for West Loch Sturgeon was reading the question a little too fast for me to hear the first part of it. But let me say that, that the strategy with regard to the Employment Alternatives Program, which in fact is not work for welfare, is a strategy that deals with a growing number of social assistance recipients who are in the employables category. That number has been growing, Mr. Speaker, at a rate faster than we like. We feel that we must provide a bridge between the economic situation today and what we firmly believe to the strengthening of the Alberta economy towards the latter part of this year and the beginning of next year. We want to be able to be sure that our Alberta workforce has the skills and has recent work experience to match the demand that we see happening later on in this year. To sit back, Mr. Speaker, and do nothing and just allow individuals who would prefer to be working no alternative, I think that would be unreasonable. This program is to give them an alternative to acquire recent work experience so that when the demand for jobs picks up in the province, they will be ready, willing, and able to work, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry I was so fast. I don't get the luxury he has to ramble on and on before I can get into the question. But the minister says that a bonus will be offered to the employers who significantly upgrade the skills of an employee. What test will be applied to determine if upgrading offered qualifies for a bonus?
Mr. Speaker, it's a very important component of the program will be a training grant to companies that agree to provide training to individuals while they're on the job. And they must submit to us their plan, Mr. Speaker, with regard to the training. It must meet our approval, and we must be satisfied at the end of the training program that training did occur. If, in fact, it did not occur, Mr. Speaker, we will not pay out the training bonus. But it is an added incentive for employers to bring people into the labour force and give them enhanced skills, which is so very important to be marketable in the labour force today.
Speaker, supplementary, I would think it difficult to meet a plan whose regulations hasn't been put out yet. Would the minister not admit, really, that if he takes a worker from welfare and puts it onto a job for a while, that all he is doing is shoving over onto the federal government the responsibility for unemployment insurance, and in effect he's not interested in training people, he's just trying to get rid of some of the load onto the back of the federal government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously the honourable member doesn't understand how the system works. People that are working today, they pay part of the unemployment insurance, as does the company. The federal government doesn't pay the unemployment insurance, Mr. Speaker, so if in fact individuals are working today and they lose their job, or in this case they go off the program and must go to UI, they have contributed to it, Mr. Speaker, so I don't see how it shifted to the backs of the federal government. The honourable gentleman obviously doesn't know how unemployment insurance works.
For his information, the federal government does backstop the UIC. Maybe the minister could share with the House, Mr. Speaker, what percentage of the participants in his program does he estimate will end up with permanent jobs after this is over?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the honourable member brought that up because it's obviously something that's very important to the success of the program. We can only go by the successes that we've had in existing programs. And certainly we have had a program, as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, called the Employment Skills Program that has dealt with moving social assistance recipients into the labour force. Between 1984 and 1987, the beginning of this year, Mr. Speaker, we have moved some 2,000 people from social assistance into jobs as a result of the Employment Skills Program. I would hope that we can have the same kind of success, and I really believe that we will, Mr. Speaker, under the Employment Alternatives Program.
Supplementary, Edmonton Belmont, followed by Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This should be a rather easy one for the minister. It's a simple yes or no answer. There are a number of injured workers who are waiting their appeal to the Workers' Compensation Board and have been referred to social services, and they're deemed single employables. Is the minister aware that perhaps this program may damage the health of some of those injured workers?
Well, the question was not simple to solicit a yes or no answer, Mr. Speaker. I can assure the honourable member, though, that individuals working under this program will be subject to the Individual Rights Protection Act, the Workers' Compensation Act, just the same as any other individual, Mr. Speaker. And if the honourable member, as the honourable member knows, this program is completely voluntary, and if individuals are wishing to access it, they have that opportunity.
Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary is for the Minister for Career Development, and I want to begin by saying that I applaud the initiatives and directives being taken by this Minister, but more specifically, can he advise this Assembly what types of jobs will be made available for single employables, and what type of pay levels will they be able to expect through this particular program?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I should indicate that, again, we must look at the programs in which we have in place to determine the successes, and that's really what we're doing. We're looking at the successes of the existing programs to try and determine the success we will have under the Employment Alternatives Program. Under the wage subsidy program, which I've referred to, Mr. Speaker, which is a program that is strictly for the private sector, we found that a number of the jobs, types of jobs, included the service sector, sales, product fabricating, clerical and related, farming and horticulture. And I should say, Mr. Speaker, that we expect much the same types of jobs opportunities under our existing programs with the private sector. Should also say, Mr. Speaker, that under the wage subsidy program, we subsidize $2.50 of an individual's wages. The average wage under that program, Mr. Speaker, was $6.28 last year. I would hope, and I would be pleased to see, and I would hope that the same level of top-up would occur under the Employment Alternatives Program.
Member for Clover Bar, followed by the member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, this question is to my favourite minister, the provincial treasurer. In light of the fact that Mr. Speaker, in light of the fact that the provincial treasury branches are going to loan the Winter Olympics $60 million at 8% for linkage financing, can the provincial treasurer indicate if this is going to be the only loan made to the Olympic Organizing Committee?
Mr. Speaker, it's not normal that I'm consulted on the normal kind of business transaction which the Treasury branch would have with a client, yet in this case, I, in a casual conversation, was told that in fact this offer had been made to the Treasury branches, and they thought in the spirit of the Alberta Olympic Games and the importance of the Alberta Olympic Games to this province, that they would participate in providing a short-term loan to the OCO 88 committee. Speaker, it should be noted that the rate was essentially perhaps preferred but close to the market rate. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, that should there be any difficulty with some of the key countries participating in the Olympics, such as we saw during the Los Angeles Olympics, that in fact the revenue has been guaranteed by way of insurance, and the Treasury branches has accepted a transfer of that indemnity to themselves to protect the full amount of the loan.
Mr. Speaker, in the minister's casual conversation with one of the Treasury branch people or the members of the Treasury branch, he touched on very briefly, can the Treasurer indicate how it was that the Olympic Organizing Committee got their loan at 8% when Prime is about 8.5 or thereabouts, and or the Bank of Canada rate in prime's well over 9. Can the provincial treasurer indicate how they got such a preferred rate of interest?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, as I've indicated to you, this negotiation, as I understand it, has taken place some time ago, perhaps as early as the early part of May. And in the context of the rates at the time, Mr. Speaker, that was a very appropriate rate. Secondly, we do, as I understand the financial institutions, they do take guidance from the so-called prime rate, but there are cases when, in fact, major loans are provided to key clients or key customers of the banking system below the prime rate, depending on the class of security. As I've indicated here, Mr. Speaker, this is a fully guaranteed loan in that there is no possibility that there be a loss involved, and because it was important to the success of the Olympic activities in February of 1988, that this loan was seen to be appropriate, both in terms of the spirit of what the Treasury branch should do for the private sector and for the activities in this province, but also was fairly reasonable in terms of the rate expected from a prime or preferred customer.
Mr. Speaker, the provincial treasurer, I guess we all remember that famous quote by the mayor of Montreal about the deficit. To the Minister of Recreation and Parks, is the Minister or the Treasurer in a position to indicate of the $350 million that's going to be supplied by all 3 levels of government, what the Alberta share is and who is looking after that to make sure that the Olympic Committee does not go over the amount that we have promised that we would help them?
Well, I'd be pleased to supply the answer to that, Mr. Speaker, and through to the honourable member for Clover Bar. Should be aware, with the 3 levels of government participating, that the City of Calgary is the host city, and they are responsible for putting on the Olympics. We as a province are providing infrastructure dollars for our commitment in such facilities as the development in the Canmore Centre and in the Mount Allen. But that is our limitations. There will be no further dollars expended, and we do not anticipate any shortfall.
Clover Bar. Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer, could the Treasurer please inform the House what is the total Government of Alberta commitment to this Olympics project through Treasury branch loans and loan guarantees on a variety of resort projects, as well as other Treasury branch loans in addition to the $60 million which we're discussing today?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's fair to say that the policy position of the government over the past 4 to 5 years has been fairly well presented to the Legislative Assembly. I think the key document has been the Premier Lougheed's position going back to the early negotiations, where in fact the government's commitment was clearly and specifically pointed out. At the same time, we were the first ones to the table, as I'm sure the member recognizes, and after some reluctance on behalf of the Federal Liberal Party to come to the table, in fact, after some coaxing and some work with them, they actually saw the light of investing in Olympics in Alberta. It was a very soft position they'd taken historically. They tried to transfer the responsibility back onto everyone they could see imaginable, but after all possibilities had been eclipsed, they finally did commit. Now, Mr. Speaker, it should be clear that our expenditures with respect to Olympics takes several forms. We've shown up front where our commitment will be with respect to the major institutions. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that through the University of Calgary in particular, where in fact significant investments have taken place with the assistance of the federal government, that in fact those projects are now in place, are essentially ready to go, and are below budget, moreover, Mr. Speaker. Now, with respect to the guarantees, Mr. Speaker, there are some guarantees which are required. There have been some assistance provided to developers in the Kananaskis area. Mr. Speaker, the solution to the problem is clear. We must remember that the Olympics in this province will leave a long-lasting legacy for all Albertans. Hear, hear. Millions and millions of dollars will be invested in important infrastructure, sports infrastructure, tourist infrastructure, and that has a long-lasting...
Member for Red Deer South, supplementary on this, Calgary Forest Lawn and Red Deer, Calgary Mountain Dew and Red Deer North.
Mr. Speaker, to the Provincial Treasurer, a question of clarification in view of the answer given by the Minister of Recreation and Parks. Will the City of Calgary be responsible for repaying this loan if OCO 88 should for any reason default on this loan to the Alberta Treasury branches?
He answered that.
Mr. Speaker, we now find that I will simply attempt to cast the terms of this loan, Mr. Speaker, so the member can understand it. Assuming that there is a maximum default on the operating side, then, of course, any default caused by a variety of disruptions, including the loss of 5 major countries as players in the games, would then trigger an insurance policy which is taken with a major London insurer, and that policy is guaranteed the $60 million loan. So there's no possibility that anyone will lose except an insurance company. Mr. Speaker, the City of Calgary, as far as I know, would not be part of that loss. They would obviously stand to lose in terms of their major investment, as would all the players. But I don't think anyone is looking forward to that kind of a difficult situation. I think the current international events are such that there is more harmony, more discussion, more openness. And unless the member from Mountain Views knows something I do not know, I would expect to be one of the most successful Olympics ever put forward by any organization that reduced prices with a large participation by the population and a major success story for this province. Let's not look at the negative side. Let's look at the positive side, Mr. Speaker.
Red Deer North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once the rabble is settled down, to the provincial treasurer, is the minister, on the main question of interest rates, is the minister aware whether similar rates were available to OCO from other financial institutions in the province?
Mr. Speaker, I have no information as to whether or not the rate was shopped. I can only give you the facts as I have them, and whether or not the rate was a comparative rate or shopped in the institutions, I'm not sure. I would think, though, that the Treasury branch is understanding the spirit in which they operate as being an Alberta institution, probably took it upon themselves to be very competitive and to ensure that this loan was provided to OCO because they sense the spirit of the games and want to continue with that spirit, Mr. Speaker.
Calgary Forest Lawn, followed by Red Deer South.
Mr. Speaker, last June the 25th, I asked the Minister of Energy questions about the economic consequences for the people of Alberta of his energy policies. Although it's a little short of the anniversary date, but given that we may not be sitting on June 25th, it's now time for an accounting. What steps is the minister taking to recover the historic share of revenues that once went to Alberta producers and to the Alberta Treasury, but which now flow to the federal government and to the refineries?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's tough to get a handle on exactly what the question is the honourable member is asking. Could I ask him to repeat it?
As the main question, I'm just informing the minister that a lot of the revenues that once flowed to the government of Alberta, to the Treasury, and to Alberta producers are now going to the federal government and to refineries. What steps is the minister taking to reverse that situation?
Well, that's not any better, Mr. Speaker. However, for the honourable member, I would hope that he recognizes the difficult times that industry has gone through in the past year with the downfall of world prices last spring and the dramatic impact that resulted in terms of industry being not able to reinvest the kind of money that they had been investing, say, in 1975 or 85, and certainly the impact on the Alberta Treasury. And this government responded to the concerns of the industry in a number of ways, and I think the honourable member could go back and look at Hansard and at the answers of a number of questions that I had given previously on the steps that this government has taken to, first of all, in the short term, address the concerns of the industry to try to create activity and jobs. Then later in the year, 1986, we announced a $1 billion package to assist industry in the longer term with royalty reductions and royalty holidays. And all those steps, of course, have resulted in significant increase. At least we are starting to see a significant increase in activity now, as we did at the end of the year last year. And we anticipate that during the course of the summer and the fall and the winter, we will see a significant increase in the number of rigs that are out there drilling. Now, Mr. Speaker, I could go on and talk about the take of refineries or the federal government or the provincial government, but maybe it would be better if the honourable member would be more specific when he asks his questions.
Supplementary to the Minister of Energy, Mr. Speaker. I will give him a specific question then. Can the Minister advise whether or not all refineries in Alberta are paying the West Texas Intermediate crude price or its equivalent at this point?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's a question that's getting down to basics and a good one. And I recall last year when we were, after the downfall in world prices, the concern was expressed by the producers in this province that the refiners had not been tracking the West Texas Intermediate spot price, and in discussions with the major companies, we were assured that in the future they would be attempting to track the WTI spot price. And over the course of the last year, the difference between the Alberta postings or Canadian postings netted back to Edmonton with the WTI spot have been very close. Up until the end of April of this year, and at that time the gap started to widen. I then contacted the same companies I had been in touch with the year before to find out why they were not tracking the WTI spot, and a number of reasons have been given, not all satisfactory to me, and I have written a letter to these major companies indicating that we expected in the future they would make greater attempts to track the WTI spot.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister of Energy. Will the Minister confirm that royalty cuts have reduced Alberta's take on a litre of gasoline to 4.5 cents, while the federal government is collecting at least twice as much of that on every litre of gasoline that comes from Alberta crude?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I assume the honourable member's arithmetic is all right. Certainly when we reduced our royalties, we reduced our take provincially, and my memory is such that I believe it works out to about 4.5 cents per litre provincially, the take, and that the take federally is about 10 cents per litre. However, going back even prior to the deregulation, or even before the downfall in prices, the federal government were taking substantially more than the province at that time, even then.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister finally admit what is obvious to all Albertans, that deregulation and decontrol of oil prices has been an unmitigated disaster for all Albertans? It has boosted refinery profits, federal government revenues, and denied Albertans a fair return on its resource.
There's the answer. There's the answer that they have. The answer to the question there is no.
Supplementary, Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, Alberta consumers are definitely being gouged at the gas pumps, with gasoline prices being 5 cents a litre more than in Toronto, even after taking taxes into account. I would ask the Minister what the government is doing with respect to this issue, and particularly whether it intends to give the Public Utilities Board jurisdiction to review the matter, as it has in Manitoba and in Nova Scotia, in which latter provinces prices have actually been rolled back.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, I believe, is inaccurate with the numbers that he states. In fact, we don't know what the difference is going to be until after June 1st. We have let the marketplace determine what the prices are going to be at the pumps in this province, and will continue to do so. Because a socialist province in Manitoba decides they're going to try to interfere with the marketplace doesn't mean that we should here. Likewise, in Nova Scotia, where they have a regulated system, the prices in Nova Scotia are much higher than they are out here. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe we have to wait until see what the prices are going to be after June the 1st. Obviously, with the fact that we had no sales tax, or not sales tax, but tax at the pump, that the prices were lower in Alberta than anywhere in the country, and with the protection that we have in place for farmers in this province, we will continue to have the lowest prices in the country.
Dear South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, too, is to the Minister of Energy. As a result of gas deregulation, gas prices in Canada have become a lot more complicated. There is no longer a single Alberta border price for domestic sales, nor a single Canadian border price for exports. It appears the Manitoba government is claiming that Alberta's domestic natural gas prices for them are actually higher than Alberta's prices for export to our U.S. customers. Could the minister advise this Assembly whether these claims are accurate or not?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when we went to deregulation, there was the removal of the border price test, and in its place, a monitoring system was established, a system of monitoring the prices of natural gas into the United States, and of course, prices here in Canada, so that we can see whether or not prices are in fact going into the United States at a lower level than what they are here in Canada. The first official report is not available yet and should be available in June. However, our Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission has been tracking these prices from information obtained from producers, and at this time the average price for domestic ex-Alberta gas is in fact lower than the average export price into the United States, so that the prices into the United States are still higher than they are in Canada. In other words, our return is higher on the gas into the U.S. than what our return is here in Canada. I would simply comment, Mr. Speaker, that if Manitoba were to take off their motor fuel tax, then they wouldn't have to worry about whether there's a difference in price.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, again to the Minister of Energy. Most recently, the Public Utilities Board of Manitoba handed down a decision approving a gas contract between Western Gas Marketing and Manitoba Gas Utilities only until October the 1st, 1987. I understand that the contract is a long-term agreement extending into the 1990s. Could the minister advise this Assembly what impact will the decision of the Manitoba Public Utilities Board have on our existing long-term agreements?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is accurate in that there are long-term contracts with respect to volumes that would be taken, but the pricing aspect of those contracts is a 2-year agreement, and it was the pricing aspect that was before the Public Utilities Board in Manitoba, and that board did approve the price that was negotiated between Western Gas Marketing and the utilities in Manitoba. Approved those prices up until the end of October of this year. The Public Utilities Board then suggested that the Manitoba utilities then go out and tender and try to get prices at a lower price than what the contract has stated between Western Gas Marketing and the utilities. Mr. Speaker, we are concerned that governments such as Manitoba may be attempting to undermine the long-term contracts that are in place, and it's our intention to try to make sure that those provinces are unable to do so. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we've gone from a system of border pricing in this province where we established the price of natural gas to a system of deregulation where consumers and producers could enter into contracts, and of course respecting existing contracts, and we intend to see that those long-term contracts are kept in place.
Supplementary, Calgary-Buffalo.
Thank you. Well, it's some deregulation, Mr. Speaker. We have government support for 15-year surpluses in the core markets, and we have opposition to open sales in Manitoba, Ontario, and Alberta in the core markets. Will the minister tell the House the state of his plans and discussions with the industry to impose a fixed administered price for natural gas leaving the province in order to protect provincial revenues. Another admission of the failure of the deregulation policy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable member and some of the members over in the centre here, who are not really in the centre, they're really off to the left, would love to think that the deregulation has been a failure. Mr. Speaker, the prices of natural gas certainly did decline, and there are many people in the industry who would tell these honourable ladies and gentlemen that we would be unable, or we would have been unable to achieve deregulation in a different environment. Deregulation is the objectives of it we still support and are working towards. However, there are a number of obstacles, as most members here recognize, that have come into place, and we're trying to remove those obstacles as quickly as we can. Certainly, the consumers in central Canada would love to see deregulation occur immediately so that there would be a significant further downward pressure on prices to their benefit. And these Alberta elected members here seem to support that position. And Mr. Speaker, we intend to work towards the whole process of deregulation, but want to slow that process down to some degree so that we don't see a complete collapse in prices, and we intend to make sure that there isn't.
Time for question period has expired. May we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions and also to have one minister give additional information? The opposed? Leader of the Opposition on supplementary?
Well, supplementary, I'm trying to understand the minister's answers and having a great deal of difficulty. But is there a point where the minister would say that deregulation is not working, and especially in the gas area, and enough consumers in Alberta have been hurt, enough producers, and that there's a point along where they would say that they would give up on deregulation, period?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when the federal minister and the Alberta government, through myself, exchanged letters last November 1st with respect to deregulation and the conditions that we wanted to see, removed before we would be satisfied that there was deregulation, then we put in place conditions on gas removal permits that if by the end of June of 1987 we were not satisfied with the results of a number of steps, namely the National Energy Board surplus test hearings, which have just about been completed, and the results of the Ontario Energy Board decision and the negotiations between the utilities and consumers there, as well as the results of the Public Utilities Board decision in Manitoba, plus the results of the negotiations between our own utilities and producers in this province. If at that stage we were not satisfied that deregulation was moving in the direction we wanted, then we would make those removal permits null and void. There obviously are other steps that could be taken, but Mr. Speaker, we have to be satisfied that the conditions are out there for the marketplace to work, and we ensure to see that they are.
Minister of Recreation and Parks, supplementary information.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't want the House to close off question period without leaving some clarification or doubt that was cast upon by the honourable members across the way. And I say cast doubt because they asked the question about the dollars and expenditure of the Olympic program. And in doing so, there was an inference that it was something secretive about the amount of monies being allocated or spent. And that's certainly not the case, Mr. Speaker, because to all members of the Assembly, there's been many stages of expenditures over the last number of years. In particular, they're all public. They're in the government estimates. And if all honourable members would happen to notice under 1987-88, there's some $3,644,000 being allocated. The ongoing economic benefits, of course, are many. The development of the Alberta athletes and through their programs are ongoing, in particular to the communities such as Calgary and southern Alberta. But I don't want to question the member's ability to add up those figures, and if they wish to do so, they're there for a number of years. They're not private, they're not confidential, they're all available. The total dollar expenditure to date is some $129 million, and I don't think it's an expenditure. I think it's an investment for all Albertans, all Canadians, and as the provincial treasurer said, a legacy that will be left for Albertans for many years to come.
No, honourable member. The member that raised the issue was Calgary Mountain View, and it was actually Clover Bar, although there was a subsequent follow-up there. Therefore, the member's not in the House to respond, and it's back to the member who initially raised the issue. Orders of the day.